now that we made it through that really difficult but ultimately enlightening language of cosmic and personal and enlightenment and divine time in Hinduism, I want to move to the other side of things, to the idea of personal time in Hinduism and how that works. Now, of course, these things are related and they're not separate from one another, but for our purposes of understanding it, I think we can talk about personal time in a slightly different way. So here are three terms that you need to know relating to time in Hinduism, and we'll use those same terms when we get to Buddhism, so you're getting kind of a 2-for-1 on this one. The first word to understand is samsara, and that word is the wheel of life or the wheel of time. And we are all living in samsara or on samsara as the wheel turns again and again and again and again. That's the first term. Now, the second one is dharma. And dharma is kind of a hard word sometimes to understand, but basically it means this. Dharma are the things you're supposed to do. Dharma is the set of responsibilities that you have based on who you are and who your parents are and where you are in your family and where your parents live and where you live and your relationship to your neighbors and your relationship to your village and your relationship to other people and to the gods. So Dharma is the entire set of rules that organize life. You've probably heard of the term caste. And caste works in with Dharma because there are different castes, upper or lower castes, in traditional Hindu society. That's breaking down now, but it still exists in large part. But each caste is made up of subcastes, and each subcaste is made up of even perhaps smaller groups, and you understand your Dharma from where you are within your subcaste and your caste. So if you are the second son of a farmer in a certain town with a certain relationship, you have a kind of Dharma. And the idea of Dharma, the theory of Dharma, is that it doesn't change, that your Dharma is precisely that Dharma of everyone else in your situation in the past and in the future. Now, truth be told, of course, Dharma is always changing a little bit, and people even move around from caste to caste. But in theory, in principle, Dharma is not supposed to change. And that's a good thing to remember because in acting out your Dharma, in following your Dharma, you are acting without changing, right? So you're trying to live your life in a way that is not introducing change into the system. Now remember, when we go back to Aristotle and Plato, not that Hinduism was thinking about that, but we can use those words, those ideas of change and not change, inside of time changing, outside of time not changing. Think about that when you think about Dharma. So if you fulfill your Dharma, if you follow your Dharma, whatever that might be, you will have good karma, right? That's a term that we all know, right? When we're going into Center City, Philadelphia, my wife will say, I hope we have good parking karma, right? That's silliness, but the idea is that the future, the things that are going to happen to you, that's your karma. That's your fate of what happens in your life. Dharma and karma interact with one another in a way that I'll talk about in a moment. And what that interaction does is explain how your life will end and what will happen when you are reincarnated. So when you die, you come back again as a new individual of some kind or another. And that individual will either be at the same social level, at a lower social level, possibly at the very lowest social level, maybe even as a bug, I suppose, or you may reincarnate to a higher social level, and ultimately you could be reincarnated one final time when you completely understand the oneness of everything, that oneness that we talked about just before. At the moment that you finally experience the oneness of time and space and gods and humans and enlightenment, you realize, you experience that oneness, that we are all the same and everything is one. At that moment, you have become Atman. You have become an enlightened human being and you have achieved moksha. You have achieved enlightenment. And at that point, you no longer have to be reincarnated, because the reincarnation is a kind of illusion, that the world is really an illusion of difference. And when you become Atman, when you achieve moksha, you will realize that the illusion is an illusion, that we are not different, that there is no difference between the sand and the glass. That moksha tells us that we are all one, that all matter and time and space are all one. We get to that point, we get to the top of that by moving through many, 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 many lifetimes of living out your Dharma and getting better karma. It sounds a little silly, but for me, I think of it as this huge cosmic game of chutes and ladders, where we're constantly going upwards towards moksha, but every once in a while we do something dumb and we fall back down again, and then we move again towards moksha, with the idea that finally all of us will achieve moksha. And when we do, we will all be Atman, and we will all realize that the differences among us and nature and time and gods are just an illusion. They would call it Maya, just an illusion of difference, that we are actually all one, that we and time and space and matter are all one. But how do we get there? We get there by living out our Dharma correctly. And if we live out our Dharma correctly, we are creating good karma for us for the next time around. Every time you do things according to your Dharma, every time you act the right way, you are moving a little bit closer to a reincarnated state higher than you are, closer to moksha. And eventually, we'll all get there. Eventually, we will all become Atman, or at least we hope.